Hello and welcome to the Mangina Dialogues. I am your host, Nick Scopes.
And I am the podcast host formerly known as the Gregolicious.
And we're super embarrassed today.
If you
Well,
can't
Greg
tell.
was, but having to say his name in front of our guest today is a very well respected businesswoman. She's the co founder of MoveOn.org and Living Room Conversations, Joan Blades. Joan, welcome to the show.
I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
We are so happy to have you. And we're very surprised you said yes, but you're here. And I'm excited to talk to you. Been following Move On for a very long time, so this is going to be cool.
So how's it out there in Berkeley, California these days?
Well, like many others, I am sheltering in place, but I feel very lucky to be in a place where I can actually go outside and totally enjoy that. And so I'm doing a lot of Zoom conversations these days.
Yeah.
It's been quite a shift in orientation.
Yeah, that's for sure. It seems like every conversation these days is on Zoom or one of the WebEx formats. How are you finding that that's keeping everything moving? Like, do you see like an increase or a decrease in productivity or human? I mean, obviously there's no direct human contact, but I think it's kind of interesting because, where sometimes, you used to pick up the telephone and make a phone call or shoot a text. Now, a lot of times, if you're using all the features in Zoom, you're actually looking at the person you're talking to, which, 6 weeks ago.
The interesting thing about this is the group that I helped start is Living Room Conversations. We've been doing video living room conversations for years.
Right.
A number of years ago, video became good enough that you can do these conversations across the country because I live in Berkeley. Now, if I want to have this, we started this 10 years ago because I was going, what's going on? I want to understand why people outside of Berkeley see things so very differently. And I had to be very intentional,
right,
to make friends outside of my political circles and social circles. And it was really lovely. That, I've gotten to know wonderful people all around the country. And that became possible to have really good conversations by video. It was really herky-jerky 6 years ago.
Right.
That shifted. And it turns out you can have a great conversation by video now. So I've been doing this for a number of years, and I've been scrambling ever since it started with the rest of this whole team to help the in-person conversations transition to video. And also, writing a whole additional set of conversations that specifically speaks to this time. Because we've been very much about helping people talk across differences, and it's about making connections. And right now, we're really digging into those making connections parts, so that people can say, "I have a friend, I have a neighbor, I have a family member, someone I care about. I'm worried they're feeling isolated," and they can have a really meaningful conversation. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's interesting too because now, I used to get a kick out of seeing like my mother who's in her late 70s or, the older generations when they first got their iPhones, right, or their smartphones, when they started all figuring out how to use, whatever it's called. I'm losing my train of thought. FaceTime.
Yeah.
And you see them walking down the street, holding up their phone, like FaceTiming their grandkids or their, whatever. I got a kick out of that, and now it's the same sort of feeling when you see all over social media everybody, posting their Zoom screen captures of, a happy hour with 25 of their friends scattered across the country.
Mm-hmm.
Which I guess is, similar to sort of what Living Rooms Conversations is, right? Just, different topics.
Yeah, well, Living Room Conversations were designed to help people really have a deep conversation, and it's 6 people typically.
Right.
Because you want to make sure everyone has the airtime to really hear each other. And it's been kind of an adventure. People are always, one of my new friends found out about living room conversations, and she's been doing these conversations that are intergenerational with her mother and her nephews and across the country, because all of a sudden we're able to make these really good connections by video, and we're actually doing it. It's been possible for a long time, but this has pushed people to, kind of taking care of each other more.
Right.
And as we're taking care of each other, these conversations are allowing some people to have relationships they otherwise might not. She talked about how she's gotten to know her nephews in a way that she probably wouldn't have otherwise.
Right. So let's kind of take it back a little bit to what, and how you got started, right? So did you go to college? Did you grow up in and around Berkeley, or did you move there? Like, what brought you to that area?
I was born in Berkeley.
Ooh, so
this is my hometown.
It's a hometown girl.
So, I'm a hometown girl, yeah.
So did you wind up
exactly?
Did you wind up in tech by birth, or did you just gravitate towards it because of growing up in that area?
I'm technically incompetent.
Nice.
I'm the person that if I can read the manual, then any normal person can, and it will probably work. My husband is the person that's technologically adept. And, together we were a pretty good pairing.
Right.
I was a mediator. And so getting people to talk to each other in a constructive way kind of is what I'm attracted to.
Right.
It's like, what are the things that we share? And how can we actually have good solutions?
Yeah.
It's just kind of critical that we start getting to that point for all the big questions we face. So I got into this because of climate change. And at this point, I sort of don't care what people talk about. I want them to be in relationship and care about each other. And when we do that, then a great deal becomes possible.
Right. So your first company, when I was looking into, your history and everything about you and the organizations, I saw that you were the creators of the game You Don't Know Jack.
Yes. Well, we were the publishers of the game. Harry was the person that came up with the concept. Yeah. But yes, You Don't Know Jack. We had 2 hit products. One was a screensaver called After Dark that had flying toasters.
Yep.
And the game You Don't Know Jack, which was, it's actually the only video game I've found to be really fun.
Right.
But I've clearly been limited, and I should try more.
But that game, right? Like, if I'm not mistaken, that game is still sold today everywhere in some form or another, right? Like, and they've taken it to a bunch of different things. You Don't Know Jack about music or TV and different forms after you guys had sold it. Yes.
It had a period of quiet, and I've been hearing about You Don't Know Jack a lot lately because it's a really great game to play remotely.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty cool.
Yes, it is. I like it.
I mean, it's a good thing to have, as a conversation piece. Plus, Nick, do you remember those screensavers that were flying toasters? Do you even know what a screensaver is, or are you too young to know what that is?
Sort of, yes.
Well, that was like the thing. It's pretty wild. Just Google it, you'll see it.
And I should note that the way I got into the business with Wes was my artwork was on the front of their first consumer product.
Wow.
And it was the first fine art on the front of a consumer product, software product, to the best of my knowledge, maybe the last.
That's super interesting.
Joan, I have a
question. It's been an adventure.
Yeah.
I have a question just regarding like the living room conversations thing. So I like the fact that you're trying to get people with, different opinions to kind of see each other's points of view and talk to each other. And as we kind of see nowadays, it seems that things are very, very divided and very split.
Mm-hmm.
But are you finding that it's really not the case, and it's more so just like a small percentage of either the right or the left are like really hunkered down in their beliefs and won't even listen to the other side, and most people are open to other ideals and talking to people with different ideals?
I wish I was seeing that. I think we are living in different narratives now. So, which is really troubling.
Yeah.
We have become increasingly separated in our understanding of the world. And we have socially, our media is separated, our social circles have separated, and we've decided it's impolite to talk across differences because, well, we don't talk well when we do so. We don't, follow the conversation agreements that, living room conversations have a set of conversation agreements everybody agrees to at the beginning. It's basically what you learned in kindergarten. Take turns, be curious, own your part of the conversation. And people know how to do this when they think about it and they agree to it. It's really, it's people being polite to each other, right, and caring to each other. But our media and, even leadership has been modeling some very bad practices in many cases. When living room conversations were first introduced 10 years ago, the vision was two friends with different viewpoints, each invite two friends for a living room conversation. Well, in the last 5 years, it's gotten so we needed to develop with one of my conservative partners something called mismatch. Think of match.com, but for people that disagree.
Yeah.
Because people are no longer willing to invite their neighbor, their colleague, their friend, their relative to have a conversation about a political issue, because they've seen so much bad behavior and they've seen relationships harmed because of politics. And that's very sad, and it's unhealthy. We can't have a vibrant democracy if we're not talking to each other.
Right.
Good decisions are made when we have everybody's best ideas in the room, and we have the agility to change as we learn things. And when we're in a defensive crouch or attack, just trying to win our point, we lose sight of what our shared objective is. And that feels to me like what we've achieved.
Yeah.
And I believe actually it's going to be the grassroots people that say, I don't like this, and I'm going to make it different. And that's why, living room conversations are open source. Everything you need to have a conversation is available on our website. We have over 100 different topics. And you don't have to talk about politics. We have a food conversation. You can just talk about what you're eating. Or we have a technology conversation. It doesn't matter if you're, where you are politically. What really matters with the technology conversation, and it's technology and relationships, your age.
Yeah.
Depending on how old you are, you have very different responses in that conversation.
Totally. When if you could identify the time when this all shifted from being able to talk to people about, in a civil manner about difference of opinion, whether, mainly politically these days, but say anything, until it really shifted. Do you have a time period you can look to and say that's when it happened?
Only in the sense that it's a long time period. Move On actually started in 98, midway in the Clinton impeachment scandal.
Right.
And the one sentence petition that my husband and I sent out to under 100 friends and family was Congress must immediately censure the president and move on to pressing issues facing the nation. Because love Clinton or hate Clinton, and this was 6 months into it, and we were sick to death of hearing about the impeachment. And there was a theory that government had an important role to play. And I thought things were way too polarized at that time. So that was, that was a statement that we had people on the right, the left, the center say, yes, censure, move on.
Right.
Let's get back to work. Well, it's just gotten worse and worse since that time. Now, I wish that were not the case, but the media is reinforced for digging into the sensational, our differences. A fight is what draws eyeballs.
Right.
And that's true in not just traditional media, but social media. So how do we counter that? We actually need to show up for each other as human beings. There are a lot of people that are saying, I don't want to talk to those people. But there are others that are saying, wow, it is time. We really need to connect.
Right.
And at this time when, we are looking at it, we're experiencing a pandemic, I think there's a moment when we're at home and maybe we can just really have a lot of these conversations and get back to that recognition that we're first and foremost in this together. And that, we disagree about some things, but that doesn't make the other person evil.
Right.
Or stupid, or it's just we disagree. And that's sometimes very confusing when people I really like see things so very differently.
Yeah.
My head wants to explode.
Yeah, it's insane. It really is. It's crazy. It makes me on a daily basis question, some friendships you have when you can see stuff so differently from someone you thought and probably is a intelligent person, but somewhere those wires just go off the rails, right? And, I like to think of myself as a rational thinker, right? I'm happy to listen to someone's opinion that isn't mine, right? And give them an opportunity to not necessarily change my mind, but at least see it from their perspective, right? But, it seems these days, no matter what side you're on, that doesn't exist, or it exists in such a small percentage of the population, right? So you look at these things that happen on a daily basis out of the White House, which if you looked at that 20 years ago, someone's going to say you're watching one of the greatest comedy movies of all time or one of the greatest horror movies of all time. Pick your lane, but it's actually happening in real life, right? And how can the same person look at that and say, this is legit, I believe all of this stuff coming out of him, this, that, the other thing, and then someone else hear the exact same things and say, this man is crazy and dangerous. And then not be able to talk to each other and say, don't you see it this way? Or maybe, I can see a little bit of your perspective, but why don't you see any of it from my perspective? It just doesn't exist.
Yeah, it's very hard when we're living in narratives that get reinforced when we're hanging out with people and listening to media that reinforces our viewpoints. We just get deeper in.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stuff out there that's kind of inexplicable to me. But I actually believe that the vast majority of people in this country, they want to do good in the world.
Yeah.
At the core, we all want to have healthy communities. We want our families to do well. We want good for the world. And so you kind of got to start on where are your connections and just kind of listen to each other on the things we disagree with and let it sink in. And maybe we will find a way. I'm not a faith-based person, but we have some faith communities more and more that are using the living room conversations. And they are teaching me to speak about faith in a way that I appreciate. It's like seeing the divinity in everyone, and that speaks to me. And it also, you know, allows me to start seeing things differently. One of my dear friends in Utah said, you know, the climate thing was not one of his concerns particularly. And it became a concern for him, not because I was persuasive, but because he cares about me.
Right.
We care about what the people we care about. Just a little, not the same way. But and you know, I am going, yeah, I guess that is progressive end time story. You're right about that.
Yeah.
Not the way I've normally thought about it. But so we start to connect and understand each other and care about each other. And then we start to find opportunities. And we're not going to get there in a day because we didn't get here in a day. It's going to take real connection and work.
Do you see in the future us being able to get back to a place where we can be more open to listening to each other? It does, because now, you know, every time, I mean, obviously the media adds a lot of sensationalism to stuff and you think everyone's very, very divided, but do you think there's going to be a point where we could finally get back to like people being a little more rational and listening to each other?
I do. I think there is some social research that suggests that 3.5% of the population is serious about a movement. It can change dynamics. It can change a culture. And we need to change this culture. This culture is ill.
Yeah, for sure.
The cool thing about the conversations is people go away, they've had a conversation, they've made some new friends frequently, but they also have new skills with their own conversations with their family, with their friends. You know, it's easy to forget that being very present and listening is incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
You know, we don't think of listening as a power skill, but it is.
Yeah, 100%. It's if you want to be a good leader, first thing you need to do is be able to listen, whether it's to people around you or people far outside of your circle. If you can't listen, you can't really hear anything.
Yeah.
And also people that are... Go ahead, Joan.
Oh, I was just going to say, and then people are sometimes really ready to listen to you once you've listened to them deeply.
Yeah, 100%.
That's kind of what I was gonna get at was, you know, my day job. I'm a personal trainer at Equinox, and you have these things where basically you meet a person for the very first time and they tell you all their goals and why they joined the gym and what they want to do. And I don't really talk a lot during those sessions. I'm not trying to like wow them with my knowledge and win them over. I'm just listening to what they want. And I just ask questions to kind of guide them in the right direction. And they always seem like, oh, you were great. Thank you so much. This was so great. And it's like, I said 10 words in this hour. So, you know, being able to listen, also people think like, oh, what a good, you know, they like to be heard. They like to talk about themselves. So why not listen to them, make them feel better? And then when time comes, you know, they need to listen to me so that they respect you. So I'm hoping that will change in the future and people can be like that for sure.
Yeah, I think it's really satisfying to have these kinds of conversations. What's been an obstacle for living room conversations is people don't feel like they have time for conversations in, you know, a world where everyone's always feeling like they don't have enough time. Right now, people just might feel like they have enough time. It's a very interesting space we're in right now.
Yeah,
for sure.
What on the Living Room Conversations site, right? I mean, as you mentioned, there's a lot of different topics you could jump into and get involved in. So, just for people who are listening who may, you know, be inclined to check it out, which I hope people are. What's the process? How does it work? So you go onto the website, you pick a topic you want to be involved in a conversation, and do you just join a conversation, or do you have to come with the 6 people, or is it a combination of both? Like what's the formatting of living room conversations?
There are a couple of opportunities. One is there's a place where you can just sign up, and then we'll send you once a week a little newsletter that says, this is what's going on, and here are conversations you can sign up to join. So we have some hosted conversations every week, which you can just show up.
Right.
We also have the ability for you to do your own conversation. And the beauty of the do your own conversation is I can ask my friend who, I know is feeling a little bit out of it, to co-host with me. And I then, we pick a topic and we pick a time and day. And we will provide you with a Zoom line if you don't have one,
right.
Or we have something brand new that's in beta called, it's part of All Sides Connect. It's part of the Mismatch project. It's just the video feature with the conversation rounds embedded. So you see them. I often do Zoom conversations and print out the conversation guide.
Right.
Because the conversation guide is a container that guides the conversation.
Right. Yeah, so that's very cool.
So that you have this listening experience. I like co-hosting myself. It feels natural, and I always meet a couple new people because my friend invited a couple people, and then I've got a couple additional friends to invite. Some people choose to do it all themselves, like my friend who invited her mom and nephews. Actually, her mom invited a couple of her friends too. But it was, you've got everything you need to do it yourself if you feel confident doing that. And I think you should, because it's actually really human, and 6 people is a sweet number for connecting and hearing different views. But we have trainings and things like that if you want that too. But then we really want you to tell us about it too, because that's how we let people know this works.
Right. I mean, it seems like a very cool, helpful, unique platform for people to get, have conversations that they may not and probably would not be ordinarily having, which is awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, I mean, before we end, this was a great conversation, and, I'm obviously super happy we got the time to talk to you. It's very humbling to have you agree to talk to us, a couple of schmoes. But, obviously with the Move On organization and Living Room Conversations, I mean, you're quite the person. So we really want to, say thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
Well, I really appreciate the opportunity to, let more people know about what we're doing here, because that's the way we can make a shift.
Right.
So thank you.
Yeah, it's very
really
important.
Appreciate it.
It's definitely, to get back to a normal place, hopefully sooner than later. It's, it's something very much needed for people to be able to talk to each other in a civil way. And, any tool out there that helps people do that, is phenomenal. So before we split, is there anything besides Living Room Conversations, moveon.org, you want to let our listeners know about, and where to find you?
I think where to find us is livingroomconversations.org. If you want to see news from across the political spectrum, one of my conservative partners has a news media called allsides.com. It's really interesting. That's the news source I look at to remind myself that, I'm living in my own political bubble.
Yeah, right.
And I like my bubble, but I find it useful to get a view out of it every so often.
Right.
And then I just want to hear what topic you're going to have a living room conversation on, because clearly, I totally persuaded you to have a conversation next week with some friends, right?
Oh, 100%. And, it's funny. I figured you were going to ask me that. And I was looking through all the different topics, and, the one that I would go to, I would be steered towards a political conversation, because that is the most interesting to me is to listen to people that I don't know. And I would choose to go into one where I don't know anyone and pick a topic and just see what comes out of it and listen to people for what their whole purpose of living room conversations is, and just kind of see what happens, right? But I also looked at the entertainment stuff, and it'd be funny. I literally right before we jumped on with you, me and Nick were talking about pasta sauce, and we're both Italian, and my family is from the Bronx in New York, and I grew up in New Jersey, knowing a lot of New Jersey Italians also, and I never heard anyone like on my side of my family, which is many Italians, ever say and refer to pasta sauce as gravy. So it's one of my pet peeves, right? Is whenever another Italian calls the pasta sauce gravy, it my mind goes haywire and I want to jump all over it. So I would love to have that conversation as part of a living room's conversation, but I don't know where I would go to find those people. Does that make psychos like me who get aggravated when someone calls pasta sauce gravy? But if you could find that conversation.
We do have a food conversation. And this is open source, so you can modify one question in your food conversation, and you got it.
Well, you know what? I'll connect with you offline to figure out how we can target people that call it gravy for me to jump into that conversation.
I like it.
Because I want to do that.
Awesome.
Joan, thank you so much for today. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. It was great.
You're very welcome. I am looking forward to hearing all sorts of great conversations because of this one here.
Well, we will certainly be in touch. And most importantly, stay safe and healthy to you and everyone that surrounds you.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you very much. Nick, you can say goodbye.
Oh, I thought you. All right, bye. I know what was happening.
Goodbye.
Bye, Joan. Thank you so much.
Bye, Joan. Thank you. Bye.
Take care.